Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at this Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities, Accessibility and Disability Policy webinar series. This topic today is regarding using plain language. We've invited two speakers from an organization to present about this topic. First, we have Robin Berry, who's with Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, TCEQ, and then we have Vanessa Thiel from SUMM-AI. So the Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities, which we serve, one of our mission statements are we want to be able to improve opportunities for people with disabilities to be able to enjoy a full, equitable accessibility in their lives and live independently, productive lives, and to be able to determine their own, some of the service we provide. We have opportunities to make recommendations for change in policy for people with disabilities, and also a program with areas, accessibility, communication, education, emergency preparedness, health and wellness, housing, transportation, and workforce, as well as criminal justice, which was recently added. And the committee also supports a networking of people with disabilities in their location area within government. And we give awards to those who promote awareness about people with disabilities and support accommodations with those with disabilities in regards to legal issues. Now, we're ready to turn it over to Robin. Take it away.
Thank you, Matthew, for such an introduction, and what a world of things that you do. I'm so grateful to be included today. I'm thrilled that this many people are interested in plain language. We have almost 200 people joining us today. That's pretty exciting. So I'm Robin Berry, and I am a publishing coordinator, not the sole, but a publishing coordinator at TCEQ, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. I've been teaching plain language classes there for 10 years in October. Now, we require 2 3-hour sessions for all staff who write for the web at TCEQ. So that covers almost any type of writing, publications, even banners and forms, and of course, web pages, because most of this type of content will end up there. Our participants do exercises in class to practice, but today we're just going to offer you an introduction and some examples to get you started. And then at the end of my presentation, I'll also provide you with some other resources because I know you're going to want to learn more. So what is plain language? I really like to call it clear communication because it involves more than just language. But language that is clear to one set of readers may not necessarily be to others. But because plain language is the nationally recognized term, we'll stick with that today and be consistent. But what is that definition? Well, plain language, first and foremost, helps your readers. It helps your audience. It helps them find what they need, understand what they find the first time they read it. That's important. And use it to accomplish a task. Let's face it, people come to government web pages for information, not for entertainment. But why should you care? Oops, sorry, we went too far ahead here. Let's back up one more. There we go. So if you embrace plain language principles, there we go. So now we're going to help you. If you embrace these principles and put them into play, you can have more pleasing interactions with your customers. You won't take so many calls to help them find what they need or explain it when they do find it. And that can improve your efficiency, as you may then have more time to apply your expertise in other important endeavors. And you can improve the effectiveness of your processes and requirements. If customers understand what we require of them, they're more likely to comply. And then last, it's easier to translate into another language. Now let's see if I can move this without jumping too fast. There we go. So what does your audience need? Ask yourself some questions about who your audience is. Why are they coming to your content, whether it's a web page or if they're reading a letter that you sent them? What do they need to do? Why do they need to come to you? Why do they need your information? And is it possible that you have a couple of different types of audiences, like the public and the regulated community? These are all important questions to know before you start laying out your content. So I don't know if you're aware of this. Actually, people at TCEQ have told me that their audience is engineers or other professionals, but 50% of Americans lack literacy proficiency, and they read below a 6th grade level. Now, that's not because your customers aren't educated. Most of us read 3 to 5 grade levels behind the last year of school completed, but it's because we're distracted by life, and that affects our reading ability. Do you often feel rushed or tired or like you're trying to juggle too many things at once? So how do we cope? Well, one of the things we do is we skim content. We only read about 20% of what we're presented, especially on a web page. So how do you do it? Well, here are 5 tips for incorporating plain language. That number 1 takeaway: focus on your reader and the tasks they need to complete. Number 2, substitute common words for formal words, like about instead of regarding. Number 3, speak directly to the person who's reading your content by using pronouns like you, your, and we and it. Number 4, include only one thought per sentence and use active words like submit instead of submission. And last, number 5, use headings, bulleted lists, and lots of white space to make your content seem easy to read. Now, we're not asking you to write on a 5th grade level, because a word that a reader needs to understand to accomplish their task is the right word. But even the expert user wants to just grab and go. So show them the right stuff. Let's say your reader submits a renewal application every year. So put that at the top of whatever your media is, labeling it using keywords, the words they would use for it. If they need to find out if they qualify, then put that information first and then the application. And if they then need more details, you can add that later. But make it easy for those who already know what they need. And only include what they do need. Cut the unnecessary content, like the history of the program or the authorizing legislation for regulations, or at least move that type of information down the page or offload it as a footnote or to some other less important location. We actually saw that yesterday in our publishing coordinators meeting. Someone had provided a big long list of the authorizing legislation for a particular regulation. And there were about 5 laws that were involved. And that was all at the very beginning before the reader even got to the content. And so we offloaded that important information into a footnote. And now the reader can read it more easily. So what about other unnecessary content? Avoid jargon or acronyms. Now we can use them among ourselves, but don't teach them to your customer. If you're referring to on-site sewage facilities as OSSFs, on the first instance, use the whole term, on-site sewage facility. And then after that, you can just use the word facility. Limit noun chains. So write this down. New web page procedures. New web page procedures. Are we referring to new procedures for web pages or procedures for new web pages? That also actually happened. If we insert for in the right place, then we know. So sometimes we actually need to add words. And then recall that one tip for implementing plain language about using pronouns. So if you see a repeated term like water quality permit, substitute the pronoun it to avoid repetition. See how all these practices overlap? So let's consider some examples now, because that's where the real easy or hard part comes in, is actually applying what we've just talked about. So this statement is wordy, it's formal, and it's kind of not reader focused. In order to demonstrate sufficient teaching experience, classroom instructors must have at least 60 hours of classroom instructional experience. Now we could shorten it by leaving off in order, because those are extra words that we really don't even need. We could just say to demonstrate, but then we have that formal word demonstrate. So we could sub in the word to show sufficient teaching experience. But even at that, we're repeating the word experience and classroom twice. So we have experience in that first line and in the third line. And we've said classroom twice in the second line. And then isn't it kind of repetitive to tell them that they must have experience to show that they do? So let's see how we can improve on that. Instructors must have at least 60 hours of in-class teaching experience. So we eliminated that first part, leaving out our stuff. And we changed to in class to specify that we do want someone who has been in the classroom rather than hosting a webinar like this. And thus we shortened the sentence. And then recall that we said that you can also use common words instead of formal ones. When there was a flood in Houston, it was a crisis, but we don't need to say that the flood event was a crisis situation. And we certainly hope they made more than a cleanup effort. So notice how we can just eliminate those extra empty words. Bonus tip. When you see a noun ending in ION, like registration, there's a verb hiding there. So switch to active language and write register instead. Write directly to your customer. We can help you determine instead of determination, or make a determination. There's that other ION ending word. We see in accordance with at our agency a lot to reference rules. You can substitute under or put the rule citation in parentheses at the end of the passage. And then give them information about the requirements for the permit instead of regarding. Now let's look at some more examples. So if you incorporate pronouns in your writing, it will sound friendly and it will make it more clear who should act. Loan applications will be reviewed to ensure that procedures have been followed. So we're kind of focusing on the thing there, the loan applications. And the keywords or the sort of red flag words there are be and been. So anytime you see those words, you know that you have been writing in passive voice instead of active. So instead, let's focus on the reader and use active voice instead. So we've used pronouns and we've said we will review your loan application. So we've personalized it. We've made it clear who's going to be acting. And we've given the reader hope that their loan will be approved. That other stuff about procedures, that's on us. That's just our process. If they didn't give us enough information on their application, we can ask for it. We don't need to tell them that that's why we're going to review them. Now, staffers have told me that this passive to active voice thing is one of the hardest features. So let's look at some more examples of that. So looking for those red flag words, our first example. The entire stretch of highway was paved by the crew. So was is a form of the verb be. Sorry about the grammar lesson, y'all. Sometimes it's necessary. Instructions will be mailed. Well, that one's easy. We see the word be. This permit shall be kept on file for 6 months. Where are we going to find that permit? We don't really know, do we? So let's shift to active voice instead. We know that the crew is the actor because we saw it at the end of that first sentence. The entire stretch of highway was paved by the crew. So let's just flip it around. The crew paved the entire stretch of highway. Now for the second one, instructions will be mailed. We don't really know who's mailing the instructions, but we can assume that someone is going to receive those instructions in the mail. Maybe it's the operator, maybe it's you, the reader. So we can just say you will receive instructions in the mail. And then last, keep this permit on file at your facility for 6 months. Notice how we've inserted some words there. We've given them a little bit more information because previously we didn't know where they were going to be kept. So we've inserted at your facility. And then there's an implied pronoun in keep. So you keep this permit. Easy peasy, right? So I said earlier that plain language is more than just words, and it's more than just sentence structure. Your reader needs to be able to find the information. So we need to make it seem easy to read also. And headings help them scan for key words. So make your headings informative and consistent in format. Try to use only about 3 sentences to a paragraph and write short paragraphs. That creates white space. Incorporate bulleted lists for comparable things. So for instance, you can list all nouns or all active phrases, and only about 7 because the brain can't really handle more than that. Bulleted lists also avoid extra words that you would need if you were writing in full sentences and long ones with commas. And they also add white space. So they seem easy to read. Now, these 3 types of headings, question, statement, and topic, illustrate the different types that you can use. And I mentioned a second ago that it would be wise to use the same types of headings in your content. Notice how the extra words at the beginning of that question heading, though, may obscure the key words. So public notice is probably the thing that the customer is most interested in. And then if we write it as a statement, well, maybe they do or don't need to publish one. So sometimes that topic heading will be your most concise and most clear. So just public notice. It has those key words that your readers need. So does this seem easy to read? It's just a great gray wall of text. When a new sensitive feature is discovered, it must be reported to TCEQ. Protection of the feature can be accomplished by removing the sediment from the area adjacent to the feature without disturbing the feature, and installing a rock berm or other appropriate BMP around the feature to control and filter any potential flows into the feature. Work must be stopped after protection for the feature is installed. See how many plain languages overlap here, like repetition. Did we say the word feature a few times? Could we use pronouns there instead? And what about active verbs? Like, remember that word, words that end in ION, like the word protection? Let's see how we can improve on this. Oh, and do you know what BMP stands for? There's an example of jargon. So in our improved version, we started out with an active verb, report any new sensitive feature to TCEQ. And that's instead of must be reported. So we've moved from passive to active, and then we've implied the pronoun you. We subbed in protect. So protect it with the following steps. Notice we used a pronoun, it, to take the place of feature. And as we move along, we see that we have added a bulleted list. So there's an example of using structure. We're talking about structure in this water quality protection, but we're also talking about structure in our sentences and our content. And so we instead went from that long paragraph into a bulleted list of 3 actions. Remove the sediment from the adjacent area, taking care to not disturb the feature. Install a rock berm or other appropriate structure around it, controlling and filtering any potential flows into it. Stop work after installing the protective structure. So doesn't that seem easier to read, as well as it actually is easier to read? Well, I told you that this was merely an introduction and examples. And so that was our down and dirty introduction to plain language. These links, however, provide additional training opportunities because I know you're going to want more practice. So first up, we have The Essentials of Plain Language by Catherine Spivey. It's about an hour long, a little bit more in detail than what we just covered. And on that link, I've given you the URLs here. You can click on that and search for plain language, and that presentation will come up. And then next up is another Catherine Spivey This one is a 3-hour online workshop, Plain Language Basics. And then next, an article by the famous and renowned Nielsen Norman Group, Plain Languages for Everyone, even experts. And last is a webpage about how to get started implementing plain language at your organization. So I hope we've piqued your curiosity and offered a few helpful tips about how to get started. And I thank you so much for participating. I'm going to turn you back over to Matthew.
Perfect. Maybe Robin, I can jump in real quick because there are some questions in the Q&A that I think might be relevant for everyone here. So I'm just going to relay them to you.
Thank you.
So one of the participants asked that it seems like a lot of the examples reduce lengthy words and legal language. And whether you have any tips to help justify these changes to legal folks who are trying to prevent every potential problem and misstep.
That's such a great question. I refer often to an expert, Brian Garner, who talks about things like shall in legal lingo. And that word has proven to be vague and unclear, even legally. So oftentimes, including that legal language is off-putting for your reader. And yes, sometimes your readers need to know what the rules are. And in that case, we do often suggest that you refer them to, for instance, the Secretary of State's website, if they feel like they need to read all of the details about the rules. But what we try to do is break it down so that it's easier to understand for everyone. And then if they need more information, we refer them to the legal stuff.
Yeah.
Hope that helps.
Awesome. Then one more question, a very specific one, whether the word adjacent is too complicated.
No.
And then just some thanks for your presentation. That was
Sure.
very helpful and they want to learn more.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Then I guess it's my turn. So the second.
So that's really good information because I have to learn a lot. And reading this, I've learned a lot. It's made a big difference in how you read, if reading is hard compared to making it a little more simple. So it really made a big impact. So thank you so much for sharing that information. So we're ready to turn it over to Vanessa, and she'll talk about her information. Take it away.
Perfect. Yes, thank you so much. I'll try to get the technical things running. Give me 1 second. And another one. Yes, perfect. So hi, everyone. I'm Vanessa. I'm from a German startup called SUMM-AI, and we're building we say Google Translate for plain language. So what I'm going to talk about is just a little bit about myself, what we do and why we do what we do. But then I want to give you some insights into what technological advancements can maybe help with creating more text in plain language and help take some of the effort that it takes away. But also I want to discuss with you what are the limitations of technology. So maybe let's get started with who I am or who we are. So you can see a picture of my team. We are often introduced as the AI, so artificial intelligence, rock stars from the Technical University of Munich. And that's exactly who we are. We are a strong team of people who want to use their technical knowledge for something good. We have the mission to make the world understandable. And this mission is actually a very personal one, since it comes from the close family circle of my co-founder, Flora. You can see her in the bottom in the middle. We have an unofficial team member, and that's Flora's aunt. Flora's aunt has a slight physical disability and couldn't go to school as long or intense as she might otherwise could have. She's super interested in politics. She surfs the web. But when it comes to very long sentences and complex structures, she doesn't get all of the information she wants and has a lot of questions. So exactly what we just heard from Robin, information that is a lot in not a nicely structured way, which unfortunately we still see most of the time, especially on the internet. And I also brought the same statistics actually. So 54% of adults in the US read below a 6th grade level, because I think this is such a meaningful number, right? More than half of the population. And as Robin also said, this is what we all experience, right? Even if we are a great expert, who doesn't appreciate it being fed to you in nice pieces that it's just easy to read through, right? So we have asked ourselves, what's the problem? Why are there not more texts in plain language out there yet? So this is the example I brought from Germany, at least. I'm excited to hear your thoughts, whether it's the same in the US. So in Germany or in the EU, at least, if you create text in plain language, this is done manually. So you have people who have experience with creating plain language, who know the audience, who know the rules on how to be as precise and simple as possible. But this manual work, it's very tedious. It's also very slow, and it's kind of expensive, right? Because you need to have all of these people who take the time to create a plain version of the complicated text. And this is where we come in, or where we try to come in, with what I said in the beginning, our Google Translate for plain language. So I also brought the example that Robin took in her last example. So basically what you do is you input a complex text on the left, you click translate on the bottom, and then you get a plain version out on the right in just a few seconds. This is not perfect. This is also one of the limitations that I want to jump into with you guys. But this can be a great start in order to take away the first step of going into the simplification task. You don't have this white wall in front of you of, okay, where do I even start if I have a complicated text? But you have it broken down in short sentences, only one thing happening each sentence, with a more active and easy vocabulary. I'm going to go ahead and jump into one of the limitations already, because we see it here. And I want to grab out the last sentence in our plain language draft. It says, then you can work again. And this is not true. If you go back to the left, it says, then you cannot go back to work again. So just a little thing that we can also jump in right now that we will see later again. This is something that was created by an AI. So there is no human intelligence in there anywhere. So you need to be very, very careful on how you handle this draft. But if you handle it in a good way, it can be a great start to help you in the process. Okay, so this is just what we do, or what we're trying to do. Now what I want to give you is a glimpse into what is artificial intelligence, how can artificial intelligence maybe help in creating more plain language, give you a little bit of the history of artificial intelligence with text and language, and how far that has evolved in the past years, where we stand right now, and what the limitations are, and maybe what an outlook into the future can be. So first, I want to give you a short introduction about what actually is artificial intelligence. So human beings can think and learn for themselves. And a human being can solve problems. That's why we say a human being is intelligent. Many people are working on artificial intelligence today, and artificial intelligence are basically just computer programs. So it's an algorithm that can do something. And it's called artificial intelligence because the computer programs are supposed to work almost like a human. That means they are supposed to learn, they are supposed to become better, and they should be able to solve problems. And you can teach a computer to do that. For example, in our case, a computer can learn to understand text. That is one area of artificial intelligence, and it's called natural language processing, short NLP. So the computer can read text, it can find problems in the text, and it can make the text better. So this means a computer can learn to understand context. And what do I mean by context? For this, I brought an example here. On both sides, you can see a bat. On the left, you can see a bat as an animal. On the right, you can see a bat, so a thing that you use to play baseball. So if you just see the word written, it looks exactly the same, but depending on what context the word is used in, it means two completely different things. And this is something that you can teach a program, and this is something that you can do with artificial intelligence. So let me start in 2013. And I brought a little graphic with me. Bear with me. I'm trying to do this as high level as I can. So this was the first milestone in working with computer programs and text. It was called Word2Vec. And it's basically a technique for NLP that we just discussed. And it's an algorithm that learns associations between words. How does it do it? It does this with the help of a large amount of text. Once the algorithm has learned, it can recognize similar words. So what you can see here is, you see, for example, on the left, you can see the word king and the word queen. And behind it, you can see the word man and the word woman. And what you can see is that the distance from king to queen is exactly the distance from man to woman. So that you can see that the relationship between king and queen is the same relationship as between man and woman. Same for walking and walked, and swimming and swam. Here, this direction doesn't mean male or female, but it means now or the past. There's also distances between, for example, countries and cities. And this is how you can have words in relation to each other. If we go back to the bat problem, we see that this is good enough, but there will be only 1 point for bat, right? Which one is it? Is it the animal or is it the baseball bat? So this is something that still doesn't solve our problem of context. Let me move over to 2017. And this is where I would say the magic happened. In 2017, there was something introduced called the attention mechanism, which revolutionized how artificial intelligence works. What I brought is an example for translation. This is from German to English. So if anyone here knows German, you can read the bottom, so the black part as well. For everyone else, just focus on the English one, so the red and the green. And translation is a very great example to show you that word for word doesn't work. Again, we need the context, right? Because if I go from German to English and I just go word by word, the sentence would be, can you me help this sentence to translate? Which is not good English. However, if I look at the bottom, I can see that in German, the words at the end also refer to the English words at the front. So in order to do a good translation, again, I need context. So I can't only look at one word, I need to look at the words around it. And I can't do this word by word or in a sequence, but I have to do it all together. And this is basically what attention does as the mechanism. It gives attention to a whole sentence or even a whole paragraph when trying to do a task and not go through it sequence by sequence. Before 2017, most AI models for text were trained using so-called supervised learning. This means they were trained for a very particular task. For example, translating words for words, answering questions. So that meant that they could only be used for this specific task. Now, what we see with, for example, ChatGPT is so-called large language models, which build on this attention mechanism. As an example of large language models, there are many different types. I brought OpenAI's GPT. And what you can see in this graphic is the revolution of the different GPT models. So it started out with GPT-1. It moved over to GPT-2 in 2019. Then it moved over to GPT-3, and then now GPT-4. And what you can see on the left is the amount of parameters that these models have. This kind of means the amount of complexity. For example, GPT-3 has 175 billion parameters in it. And that's approximately twice as many neurons as the human brain has. So this means the amount of calculations that are being done is kind of twice as much as the human brain can do when propagating something through your brain. And what you can see is that already GPT-3 was quite good. But when it came to solving human tasks, for example, writing the bar exam, it wasn't completely bad, but it was in the lowest 10% when compared to human people taking this test. Now, moving over just a few years to the current version, GPT-4, we can see that now, compared to a human, the AI lands in the top 10% of people taking the bar exam. So what we see is a very steep increase, but what we also see is, okay, there is kind of a limit, right? Because how much better can you get? So this is something that I think is a very, very interesting point in time that we're at right now. We have seen this amazing increase in ability of an AI. And now we're there, and we need to think about first, how are we going to use this that we have now? How can we include this to make our lives better, but also have it in a good way and not have it go rampaging around? But also, what does the future bring? Where can this even go? So the most important problem, I think, is how can you be sure that these technologies are behaving correctly? And it's very difficult to do this. So what we believe, it's very important to have human values and rules around it. So for example, in our tool, we don't only use an AI. We try to have rule-based things around it to make it as consistent and repeatable as possible. And what is the most important is that the human is always in control. I was at a very interesting talk for the new Grammarly feature, where they also use generative AI. And what the person there speaking really resonated with me. He said, so in technical terms, if you create an algorithm using artificial intelligence, for a long time, you always had to make sure that a human was in the loop. So somewhere along the line, you had a human in the loop. But what he said, and I think that's bringing it right to the point, is it shouldn't be a human in the loop. It should be the AI in the loop and the human in control. So maybe jumping to my last slide and also the limitations that I want to bring. Maybe I can do a short breathing break so you guys can switch. Perfect. So the limitations of AI. So we've now seen where we come from. We come from just relationships between words that a computer can learn to relationships of words inside a context to now a computer program being able to answer bar exam questions just as good as humans. What I really want to stress here is that artificial intelligence is a support for the human intelligence. So we need to find places where it can help. And I'm sure there are a lot of places where it can help, but we also need to make sure that we have the right process along it. And for our case, so using AI to create plain language texts, I brought two examples that are still very much limitations. So the first one that we also saw in our example is the context obviously can be misinterpreted. And this problem grows with the complexity of the original text. If I have a very legal text with sentences that are, I don't know, 5 rows long, it will get harder for an algorithm to break it up and not miss or not mess up the context. And then also what Robin said, adding words, adding information. This is something where you need actual knowledge. You need to know who your target group is. So there will still be hard to understand concepts in an algorithmical planification. So you need a person with knowledge of the audience that needs to add maybe some more information, more background information to give more explanations on those hard to understand concepts. Awesome. So I think that's it from my side. I hope you guys took away some knowledge of artificial intelligence for text. And I'm excited to hear or read any of the questions that you have.
So I do have one question for you in the Q&A box, Vanessa, and it was from Tim Mann, who asks, do you know what kind of data sets were used to train the AI translator?
Yeah, I do. We built it up ourselves, actually. So we have our own group of translators for, in Germany, we have easy and plain language. So there's 2 types of simplifications. And we have our own translators who have learned to be able to do it. And they are experts in the field. And we're building up our own data set with them as experts. Also talking to people who need easy or plain language. And then we build it up from scratch in the past 2 years.
That's the only question I have in the Q&A, Vanessa.
Perfect. That's good then.
Well, we can open up for more questions. If you all have more, please feel free to ask. The floor is open. We have until 3 o'clock. If anyone has any more questions, feel free.
Yeah, perfect. I can see the chat as well. As someone who speaks other languages, I will say that I use so many tools to help me write and summarize long writings for me to understand better. I feel you, as you guys can probably hear. I'm also not an English native speaker. So yes, tools also help me quite a lot. And then another question, what is the difference, if there is one, between AI and machine learning? Just curious. Yes. So those are very similar terms, but machine learning is one part of artificial intelligence. So it responds to a specific group of algorithms, but it is used very similarly, yes.
And it looks like there's a question for me. How is TCEQ using Chat GPT or the like? To my knowledge, we are not at this time. So this is all interesting information for all of us to consider moving forward.
Robin, you said you teach some classes for state agencies. Can you expand a little bit more about that?
Well, I teach at TCEQ, and in the past, when we didn't have a full roster, we did expand and open up to other agencies. But now, of course, that we're fully staffed, we are obviously emphasizing training our own staff. So at this time, we're not opening it up to other agencies, unfortunately. And that's why I was happy to see
shucks.
the other offerings, the webinars that are available to people.
I think this is great information that's vital, because we see many businesses and the state agencies and websites, and including federal websites, oftentimes there's information that's important that's not really in plain language. So we have to kind of read through and to be able to understand what's being said and able to be able to process information in various situations. But sometimes we have to call and ask to get more clarifications or ask more questions because it's not clearly understood, that we have time to be able to understand. So really, I'm happy that we've had this webinar and to share this information. If you have a way to contact both of Robin and Vanessa, if you want to be able to get some more information, you're able to do so.
Sure, I'm at robin.berry@tceq.texas.gov. Feel free to shoot me an email.
Same for me. You can also just contact me via email. I'm happy to hear any thoughts or questions. We're very much in the phase where we're trying stuff out and looking for people who are willing to give us some feedback. And my email is vanessa@SUMM-AI.com.
And then Matthew, we have a request for the links to the presentations. And I believe,
yes, the website will have those, the webinar will have those PowerPoints as well. So you'll be able to access those links and that information once this webinar is over, and we'll have a recording as well. So if people want to watch it again or they had missing information, they're welcome to watch that on our website.
And then there's a question about the most effective ways to offer plain language trainings to other staff members who are responsible for writing. It is a requirement at TCEQ that, as I said early on, if a staff writes for the web, they're required to take both of our classes. And then that web page that I suggested in the last of the links offers some suggestions about how to start implementing plain language at your agency. I would love to see an offering statewide, because we are a very big state. And so it's great that we can offer that at our agency, but we know that others could utilize it as well. And there used to be an offering, I believe it was offered by an agency that is no longer. And so that's a missing. It's very important, and the more people we can get trained on it, the more effective we're going to be at protecting the state as far as environmental regulations are concerned.
Any more questions anyone has?
There is one question about if you do not have access to ChatGPT-4 or your agency does not allow its use, can you reduce the reading level below 6th grade level as a substitute? Someone asked me to record my training and put it on YouTube.
So maybe for the question, if you don't have access to, for example, ChatGPT, I know that there are kind of like proofreading tools out there that help you filter out very complex words, for example. I know one of them is Hemingway. I think it's a free to use editor that you can just open on a website where you can insert a text that you have written, and it gives you some help and tips on what you can still change in your text. Other than that, feel free to reach out to us because we're, as I said, looking for testers, and I'm very happy to get some feedback on it.
And assuming everyone can see.
Also, I think there's a lot of government agencies and that are concerned about the new technology. They're not sure about privacy concern and other. So there's been a challenge with that. So I think that people are kind of monitoring to see how that's going to be going and what that process looks like.
Yeah, we see the same in Germany. I think Germany is probably also very strict on guidelines regarding data privacy and data security. So yeah, we have exactly the same.
It looks like Lorna has offered a link that the Texas Department of Insurance offers a resource also, if anyone is interested in checking out theirs. That's in the Q&A.
Wonderful. Well, I'm happy to hear that the other state agencies are taking those initiatives on. So now we're almost out of time. So if any last words from the two of you before we were to close?
So we're getting a request for our emails in the chat box. So
I'm going to put mine in. Maybe you can answer as well if you click on the answered ones. Yes. So Robin, if you're in the Q&A, if you click on the answered questions and scroll down, you can type in your email address as an answer.
Gotcha. Thanks, Vanessa.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think it's time to wrap up this webinar. So thank you all for your participation and watching this webinar, and we look forward to other recordings of various webinars that we will have on our website. So I'd like to invite you to look at those, because there's a lot of various information that we're offering to people with disabilities and topics that are necessary to provide services that's important to the Texans. So thank you for your time. Have a wonderful week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for moderating and getting this started, Matthew.